Hello and welcome to the Property Business Podcast. I'm James George, and once again, I am joined by my co-hosts Jonathan Woods and James Hughes. How are you guys?
Very good, very good. Sun is shining. I'm up in Chester for a few days, so I am good.
Yeah, likewise, just on the move as always, back to back with various different appointments. So always looking forward to our Monday afternoon chats. But yeah, really should be a good episode.
So let's first of all address why we didn't have an episode last week. We had a great guest come on the show, and unfortunately, his audio didn't upload to our software. So we're going to have to get Miles back on the show. But this week, we've got a really fun podcast because we're going to talk about why you should use an EXP agent to sell your home. So this is a great podcast for any agents thinking of leaving a traditional real estate model and joining EXP, but also great for sellers. You can actually hear yourselves why you should use an EXP agent over your normal high street agency. So Jonathan and James, what we're going to do is pretend that I am the seller this week, and I want you guys to come over to my home and do an appraisal for me and explain why I should pick you guys to sell my home. So kick it off, guys. Go ahead.
Well, I guess so. I'm a independent agent of 14 years, having worked at two of London's largest corporations previously. I was at Foxtons for 6 years, then at CBRE. I'm now independent. What that means to you, Mr. Vendor, is that you get a very experienced agent of 12 years. Bringing all of that experience, I now run my business. It's my brand, it's my reputation. One of my biggest, I guess, conversations when I'm on a market appraisal is explaining how a high street agent would work. So the very charming manager, he'll sit down, he'll go through the market chat, talk about how good they are, but then in reality, he goes back to his office. They deal with probably 20 to 30 instructions. They don't give you, the vendor, the service and the time that you deserve, but ultimately, it is not that charming manager who's actually doing the viewings. With me as an independent agent, I work with you, the vendor, but more importantly, it's myself that works with the buyer. So the buyer, they get a very experienced agent of 14 years, very passionate, very knowledgeable, who knows what I'm doing, frankly, to give the buyer the best service, to give hopefully you, the vendor, the top result. It's one thing selling it, it's getting it to complete, which I guess we'll kind of come on to as well. John, what's your pitch? What do you say?
Well, okay, so it's all dependent, obviously, on the individual themselves. But I think, working around what you've just said there, I think one of the key points is that the average agent will list and sell in the region of 40 to 50% of what they put on the market. So the market model is about list, market share, get as much on the market as possibly can, get it in for a long contract, and then try to work the price down if needed, and collect up as many properties and then try and sell some of them. Now, what we do is completely the opposite of that, which is to take on property and actually look to sell everything that we list. And of course, we can do that because we're working with smaller volumes. And I think, the key point is that you were saying there is that about the manager that's come to that appraisal, he's there for a reason, or she's there for a reason. She was a very good, or he was a very good salesperson and has risen up the ranks to get to where they are. Now, not necessarily through any fault of their own, but generally due to overwhelm. I had an office with 5 staff in it. We probably needed at least 10 to be able to run a proper business with the response levels and service levels that I would like. But you can't do that. Now, when you're working with a small number of clients, and of course you're taking on the lion's share of the commission for that, you can be far more dedicated to the purpose. And the analogy I use often is one to say, look, if you have you're lucky enough to have private healthcare, for example, you will get a consultant doctor. If you're sick, you'll be able to go and visit that person at a time of your choosing, and you will also. I mean, when we were a couple of years ago, we had to go through using private healthcare for quite a serious position that we had in our family, and I had the consultant's doctor's number on my phone, and he was the same guy that was down at the NHS, and he would love to give his dedication to every single patient that he has, but he couldn't do that because of the volume. But for myself, that's what I've, I look at it. We've got clients on our phones. We deal with it every hour of the day, and you're getting that, experienced person from start to finish. So from the point of instruction, being there to advise on the listing, being advised on the marketing, but then also on the viewings themselves, meeting the buyers, and then from point of offer to completion. And I think that's the key, is getting that dedicated individual from the beginning to the end, not just for the appraisal itself.
Now, the first thing that most sellers worry about is price. And obviously, a lot of agents will say what someone wants to hear and not necessarily what they should do in order to try and, get the home to sell. So, Jonathan, for you, how would you generally price a home? Talk us through that process for us and how you would do it, maybe differently to how a normal high street agency would do it.
No problem at all. I think there's 2 points here. One, is it secondhand stock? Is it already on the market? Or is it something that someone is considering putting to the marketplace? Because there are two different ways and strategies. Of course, often if it's secondhand, meaning that it's already been on the market, there will be certain things that we need to address, not just about price. So presentation, photographs, media, has it been exposed to the marketplaces in all channels, not just Rightmove and Zoopla? So are we using social media? Do you have a good network of individuals that we can put that out to, of which we do? And we've got over 35 brokers now in a collaborative group of people that carry buyers, all of which have got top level experience. But on pricing myself, I've moved away from trying to guess a price and trying to, you can use comparable and you can look at what's sold on the street and what the price per square foot is and all of the different metrics that you can use. But really, I've moved into what I call a guide price strategy rather than an asking price strategy. So what I mean by that is that Rightmove have search brackets on it as a tool which people use to filter their searches. So if, let's say, we'll use 1 million, for example. So Rightmove goes 800,000, 900,000, 1 million, and then between 1 million, it goes up to 1.25 million. That's a huge jump there. So if I think a property's worth, let's say 1.1, there's no benefit in me putting it on the market at 1.1. You're basically filtering out a huge numbers of buyer searches there. So I would price it at a guide price 1 million to 1.25, and then the market will then bring buyers to me, of which then I will then go and negotiate with those buyers when we meet them to get the best possible price. And I think what I find much more, let's say, a more suitable way of acting for my vendor is I'm here to work for the vendor that is paying the fee, not for the buyer. Now, if you have an asking price that people are then looking to bring down with offer, you'll go on the viewing, and then you'll get the question, what do you think the vendor will take? And then I'm already then colluding with the buyer then to then come up with a reduction in the price for my vendor, and I'll go back to my vendor and try and negotiate. I think it should be the other way around, and that's why we do it in the majority, where you have a guide price of, say, 1 million, and then someone will come in and make an offer, and we will negotiate the buyer then up to get the best price possible. So it's all about strategy. It's about choosing the right strategy for that client and also for the marketplace that you're in, because you could be looking at the lower end of the market. The brackets aren't as large, so you've got more scope to maneuver with it, with starting at maybe a higher price, seeing what happens and then adjusting it slowly. But if you adjust it down, you've got that reduction history. If you price keenly with a good guide price, often you'll find that you'll get a much better result. I mean, I just had one quite recently that was on the market for probably 2 months at 725, and then we guided it at 700,000. Actually sold it for 731, and that went in a week because it was on at the right bracket. Because Rightmove goes 700 to 800. If you put it on,
it's funny. You mentioned a lot of really interesting points there, and when I've sold a lot of homes in the US, and we would have different pricing strategy depending on the home and also depending on the market. If it's an absolutely crazy seller's market and there's just 1 million offers on every home, then you can maybe be more aggressive. If you know a home's going to sit for a while, then you might go a different strategy. One thing that I've always hated doing is for a home to sit and then having to continually reduce the price. So for me, I would much prefer. I love the price range strategy that you mentioned before, especially if it's in like a big, middle gap between the Rightmove levels. I think that was a really good analogy. If it's like a 1.1 million, then putting it on between 1 to 1.25 is really good. And by doing that, if you don't sell it at 1.1, 1.15, and you have to sell it for 1,050,000, for example, you don't have to keep reducing the price if you priced it too high. I love getting it's so much easier to get multiple offers. What I found in a very aggressive market was undervaluing the home massively and putting offers over. And obviously, there's different countries in the world. I think Scotland does that, don't they? They do an offers over
Yeah, they do, yeah.
policy.
I think guides work in the same way to that. It gives you a bracket, but it's about accessing look, if you can imagine like a pyramid, you've got more buyers the further you go down into where your sweet spot is in your marketplace. And if you see some people put things on, I don't know, 499, right? So 499, you've got a bracket of 450 and you've got one at 500. If you put it on at 499, what about the guy that puts in 500,000 as his top and his middle? Sorry, his bottom 500 and then his middle his top end 550. You've missed him completely, and that was for £1. So hitting it on the nose at 500, 499, you're going in retail strategy and thinking, oh, that looks better because it says 499. But it was completely wrong because you've just alienated a whole bracket of buyers that you can't even get access to. So it's about being smart and understanding how the searches happen and also where your core buyer sectors are and where your applicant pools are. But it can be odd because you can have properties which I've got a one bed in Battersea at the moment, which is really good value. It's amazing. It's in a new build complex, but it's getting no inquiries at all. And you kind of think, well, is it a price thing or is it just that marketplace for that particular type of property is just really slow at the moment? And that's probably what it is. There's not as many investors around, and also Help to Buy has been removed, and therefore that's what really fueled that marketplace.
And one of the things you mentioned was if the property's already been listed by another agent, obviously that's really important if it's a new property or an old one. And obviously the marketing. So in regards to the marketing, what would you do different? I know you do amazing videos, for example, which is something which is obviously massive in America and has only really started to just come over in the UK. So how would you market a property differently? I know a lot of the big high street agencies will just stick it on Rightmove and Zoopla and just expect it to sell. So what would you do differently?
I think there's a couple of points here. One is obviously presentation and making sure that you've got the best photos, that you've got a good video. And the feedback I get from those videos, everyone that comes on a viewing, they're like, really loved your video. It was really helpful. It really helped me to really feel the property before I get there. So that kind of cuts out, let's say the buyers that turn up that not that you don't get, an offer off every viewing, but that they're more committed buyers for that viewing that are going to turn up. But of course, you use that video in other channels, so your social media. I'm sure James and anyone else that's in the group has had great success with people buying and selling and inquiring through Facebook, through Instagram, through LinkedIn, which we use extensively. And because we've got more dedicated time, we can put that effort in. Where a high street agent, they will have social media and they will have people dealing with it, but that agent won't be able to be as active on it because of their time constraints, of the amount of volume that they're dealing with. But in terms of doing things differently, it's also about the connections and the people that you have within your network of brokers. So we'll do a Brokers Open, which is a day or an afternoon where we would invite as many of our other EXP agents in our group to come and visit that property to have a look at it, so that they can then feel what it looks like. I actually met a broker on Saturday who's I've got a listing up in Barnet, and I showed him around that because he's got a couple of buyers up there as well. That is almost like what an agent. If we've got some background noise now, I've got police coming past me.
No worries.
The dangers of being out and about, but having access to that network of brokers who are all top level agents. We're not talking about someone who's just started the industry. We're talking people in the majority that have got over 10 years experience. So you're exposing it to that network of people. But what I also do, which is something which the high street in the majority won't do, is that all my listings are open for every single person to sell. So I will go down to, I'll firstly take the mandate and instruct it. I will have the media marketing and the exposure online, but I will go to local agents and speak to them and say, look, if you have buyers for this listing, you're more than welcome to bring them around to come and view it. So I had a viewing on my house up in Barnet yesterday with a company called Statons. They sent a buyer down there to view the house. We've actually just had an offer on the house from them, of which I will then do a split commission with them if we agree it. Now the offer's at 2.2 million. We need to get to 2.3. If I get that deal, then we will split 50-50 on the commission. The point is that we're not competing, we're collaborating. And
I love that. Obviously, that's a massive thing. The US market, that's how they work. So you always have a selling agent and a buying agent, and the buyer's agents will go around and take them to 1 million homes at the weekend and then help them decide on what they're offering. The problem with the system here is you don't have that, and so the way that you're doing it, I mean, if someone's got a buyer from another person, you can then work collaboratively with them to help sell the house. So I know you do this regularly, Jonathan, and have sold a lot of homes like this rather than just sitting for 6 months and not selling. You're selling a higher percentage than other people because of ways like that.
Yeah, it's great because an agent will call my vendor and say, and the main, let's say, combative way of gaining a listing from another agent is, I've got buyers, we've sold this on the street, we've sold that on the street, and therefore you should be listed with us and not with them. Now I turn that around on its head. Is that, look, if you instruct me as your partner in the sales process, meaning that I'm your agent, I will put that listing on all of my channels and online, but also I'll go to Hamptons, I'll go to KFH, I'll go to all of these other agencies, and if they have buyers, of which they say that they do, then they can bring them to my listing and sell it. So in that way, you're getting access to all of the market, but you're having one single point of contact and also someone who's going to advise you on that. And so the other agents then become your collaborators as opposed to your competition. And I think that's where we've got to move more towards, is that the sole here, the purpose is to sell the person's property, not for you to compete to try and sell it. We should work together to get it sold. And if that means that someone else has got a buyer, the difference is, I suppose, is that I've got enough in the deal to be able to split out. Whereas if you're agency to agency on the high street, the actual individuals themselves in the front office are only getting 10% of the deal. So, if you've got a £10,000 fee, they've only got 1,000 to play with. So splitting out £1,000 is 500 quid each. It's not that exciting. Whereas if I've got 10,000 and I give £5,000 to one and 5 to me, I'm still happy with 5,000. That's not, if we get it sold, we get it sold. And I suppose that is the difference, is that when you've got more and more brokers working for what they deserve to be paid, but less of that money going to the multi-levels of and having the high street offices and paying for everything else that is needed. But I suppose that's another conversation for another time. I think, people will say, how can you charge the same as a high street agent? Well, there's plenty of reasons why, and I can go into that later on.
And that's one of the key things that you mentioned there is just regards to your reputation as well. So you want every home to sell because of your reputation, whereas if you are a big company that's selling hundreds of homes, one of them not selling isn't as big a deal. But
that's the same, yeah.
Every single home for you is really important. You know that you have to sell the house to get paid. And I think that's one of the big things, and one of the big selling points from using someone like yourself, Jonathan, is that you are going to do absolutely everything to not only market the property correctly so that you get offers and you sell, but I think one of the big things is also making sure it closes and being there available all the time and taking someone through the process. Whereas I think the normal high street agent is just a numbers game and you're just another number.
Yeah, and I think, along with lots of other things, is your reputation's on the line, but the service levels need to be impeccable. If I get a bad Google review, the impact to me is huge because it's there forever, and it's also a direct reflection over what I've done. If you work for a company like, I don't know, let's say, Savills. Well, if you're the manager of Savills Wandsworth and you get a bad review, the review is on Savills. It's not directly on you. You can hide behind that company name, and you can quickly push that down with some more viewing for more Google. But it's not that same care of whether, not to say that people don't care whether they get a bad review. Of course they do. Anyone I did myself. But the impact on that is a lot higher. And like you say, you've got to kill what you eat. You've got to get paid. And that doesn't mean doing the deal at all costs. Of course it doesn't. It means making sure that the right conversations are had at the right time. But with 1 in 3 average across the country, I think it was 1 in 3 sales fall throughs. When a fall through happens, that the impact that has on me as a business owner is astronomical. So the fight to keep that let's say you get a phone call from a buyer saying, oh, I'm going to pull out for XYZ. Well, if you're dealing with 100 instructions on the market and you've got 6-7 negotiators, they're hungry for deals, they've got more deals coming from left, right, and centre. The conversation will probably be like, okay, all right, well, they might try a little bit, but more importantly, be like, okay, just call the vendor, sorry, it's falling through, but don't worry, we'll get it back on and we'll resell it. Whereas for someone like us, we're going to use every possible avenue and tactic to be able to reassure that buyer that they don't want to pull out, that they should be continuing onwards with the deal. If there's problems with surveys, we're going to work through it. Now, all good agents are going to do that, but are you going to be on the phone at 11 o'clock at night dealing with that? Are you going to be doing it on a Sunday? That's the difference. When your livelihood's on the line for it, you're going to fight for it. And I think that's what vendors want and should get. Is that dedication to the process, which is what you get from an independent as opposed to getting from a high street agent. But I don't really necessarily want to sort of put down other agencies, because there are, I worked in companies for many years, and I felt like I did the best I could possibly do at the time, because I cared about my job and what I did. But there are times when you're so overwhelmed, there's so much going on that you just cannot do it to the same level. It's just not possible when you're dealing with such massive volumes. You just can't.
No, the truth is when you work for a high street agency, you generally work certain hours of the day, and you need a certain amount of time off, and you need that time off because of the amount of deals that you're doing. But when it's your own business, you are going to do those extra hours outside of the hours that you should be working, because you know how important it is to the seller, and that often if you don't make that call on a Sunday, I used to, I remember like being in Disneyland and being in the line at Disneyland, taking phone calls because deals were going to through on the golf course, really important deals just about to fall through, and you do what's needed when needed. Whereas the positive thing about working for a normal high street agency, if you work for them, is the fact that you can switch off and you can just go home. But for us, the positive for the seller is we never switch off, but the negative for us is that we don't ever switch off.
Well, I think you can start to build in leverage as you become more successful. I have sales progressors that look after the general oil, greasing the wheels to keep that deal going, which obviously I pay for. I have assistants that help to build in certain bits of leverage so that I can start to switch off slightly. I'd love, hopefully, in the next year to get to a point where I can actually have a holiday where I can go and turn off. Will I actually ever do that? I don't know. But
the good news is you now have other people within our network that have also joined EXP that you can, say for example, someone needs to do a viewing on a Sunday and you've earmarked that as a day off. You can get someone within our network to go and do that, viewing for you, for example. And Jonathan, you've obviously built a great network underneath you that you can rely on other agents now and work collaborative. And these are really experienced agents. These aren't someone who's just joined the company is going to start showing homes around. You've got some really experienced agents that you're working with.
Yeah, that's key, and it's a point for another podcast about when you're looking at becoming an independent agent, on who you choose to associate or who you're joining with, because EXP is a partner in my agency, and of course it's global. There are over 90,000 brokers across the world, but within that structure there are separate kind of almost like mini brokerages in a way. And we all obviously, there's a full access to collaborate across the whole of the EXP network, but within our sort of organization, as they call it, we have 35, soon to be many more brokers joining, and there's a reason for that. One, it's mentoring. Secondly, it's the assistance in building your business. The thirdly is the collaborative nature of us all being able to. I look on our WhatsApp group this morning. There was Miles, who sadly we got on last week. He's just got a new listing in Streatham. I've got a buyer for that who's one of my vendors that's looking in Streatham. I've already sent it to her before it's even gone to market. Now, we can only do that because of the connections that we have, and I think that's a real positive for it. And that's the other thing with vendors choosing, an independent. People will say, "Oh, we've got an office in Wandsworth and we've got an office in Clapham, and therefore we're going to work together to sell your home." Well, in reality, it doesn't happen that much or that well. because people are focused on their particular spot, and that's what they'll do, just sell their area. We don't have any constraints on area. We can sell it. I've just been over to Hounslow this morning. I'm now back in Earlsfield. I'm going over to Clapham later. I happen to be Southwest London, but we can take on listings anywhere we want. James is up in Chester at the moment, I think, dealing with one of his own.
Unfortunately, we've lost him. Yeah, he's up in Chester at the moment, selling a home with another agent up there, and for some reason, I think he's lost signal or something. We've completely lost him off the podcast. But yeah, one of the negatives that people, I'd say, are not worried about, but one of the things that they question is the fact that we don't have offices, but we see that as a positive, because let's face it, it's unbelievably expensive running an office. And we have decided to not go down that route as a company, so that we can spend that money, put it back into the marketing and other areas of business, so that we can sell our homes. Because the truth is, you don't need an office to work from. You don't need to have a high street presence. Everything is completely changed now. Everything is online. You don't go into back in the day, if you wanted to buy a house, you would walk into 20 different estate agencies to find out what was for sale, and you'd look in your newspaper that was a week old to find out what was for sale. Now things have changed. If you want to buy a home, where you look is you look on Rightmove and Zoopla, and you use social media as well. That's generally how things have worked. So you don't need a high street presence anymore.
No, I mean they're fantastic adverts, that's for sure, but very, very expensive ones for that. I mean the average rents on a premises around here would be, I would say, at least 80,000 a year, plus rates on top of that, and then utility bills, etc., etc. So having an office. We actually do have, I mean, I work from, we have global Regis office worldwide access through EXP, which I can use as a base to work from. I go there on usually a Wednesday and often a Tuesday. I quite like working out of that office space, but then I'll also work in various different parts around London. I'm mobile, I'm agile. If a viewing comes in, a request now off this podcast, and there's a viewing that wants to go, I've got the keys with me. I can jump on a train, jump on a line bike. I can be there in 10 minutes and show the home. Now, on that, we can be reactive to people when they want to view it. And obviously, that's depending on us getting access through the vendor or the tenants that are there. But I can do it, and therefore I can satisfy that need to view things when needed. But we do. You can have an office if you want one. There's nothing to stop you doing that. But it's a place to corral people it's a place for work. And I think if you're self-motivated, and we've just been having a load of work done at our house, so I don't tend to work from my house, but some people do have a really nice setup at home and they can work from home. But I actually prefer being out and about. I really enjoy it. It's separate my home and my work from two different places. But
so, is there anything else you wanted to cover on the topic of why we should use an EXP agent to sell your home that we haven't already talked about, Jonathan? No,
I think we've covered the points on there. It's like analogy, another one. I like analogies, but so I go to a really lovely local coffee shop that's in my area, and I always see people get off the bus or walk past it and walk over the road and go into Starbucks. And I think that there are people that will always go to Starbucks. There is people that will always go to McDonald's because they know what they're getting, and they like that regularity. But if we stop and think about it, is that, do you really want to support someone like McDonald's and Starbucks, or do you want to walk into that artisan coffee shop where the guy or girl that set that up and put all their life and soul into running that business, and that when you spend and buy that coffee, that you're helping them to build their lives and to better their children's lives and to better our communities? And I think that's what I look at when you're looking at someone like us and as an independent agent, is that you're helping a small business owner, and you're helping someone, and you're working with someone who actually really definitely cares about what they do. And therefore, there's always going to be people that are going to go and give their money to Starbucks, but hopefully more and more people will start to support small business and endeavour in enterprise and entrepreneurship.
Brilliant. And how are we best getting hold of you, Jonathan, if we want you to sell our home or find out more about EXP and potentially work with you and collaborate with you in the future?
Of course. So if you Google Jonathan Woods, I should hopefully come up very near the top there. So Jonathan Woods is on my Google page and also on my own website. But you can get me on Instagram as the _London_agent. You can get me on LinkedIn as Jonathan Woods Real Estate, and Facebook I'm also as Jonathan Woods Property Limited. So lots of different ways to find me. If you put in Jonathan Woods into Google, I think there's a vet who's got the same name, and then there's me. So have a look.
And I am JG_EXP on Instagram or James George on LinkedIn. If you like the podcast, please do give it a follow. Give us a review. We're looking for more guests to come on to talk about all different types of topics as well. So feel free to message us about coming on the podcast. And I look
Promise we will
forward
keep
to
it recorded.
Yeah, and we'll promise we won't have any more technical issues. Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll get Miles on hopefully again in the next couple of
Yes,
weeks. And Jonathan,
definitely.
thank you so much for joining me again. Have a great week and look forward to seeing you again next Monday.
You too. Have a good week, James. Bye.